Good morning. I'm excited to be here with you guys this morning. I want to say thank you again for your partnership with us on campus. Actually, your church is bringing us food this Thursday night for our students, and we truly appreciate that. Nothing says I love you to college students like free food. So thank you for being a part of that. I'm super excited about being here with you this morning as Toby began to share with me some of the things you're teaching through. And I said you started a mini-series within the series that you're doing on evangelism. And that's really a passion of mine. And so he asked me to come and talk with you in this kind of second sermon in the series. And so we're going to be talking through today this idea of answering the big question of why. Why do we do evangelism? Now, if you're a parent, this is a question that you know well, right? Yep. It's our kids' favorite question. In fact, if you're not a parent, when you were a kid, you may remember asking this question all the time. You would say to your kids, hey, it's time for bed. Why? You can't have dessert till after dinner. Why? I'm sorry, but you can't hit your sister. Why? Anybody relate to that? Just me? Yeah, it seems like constantly my kids are asking the question why. And I think it's a good question, especially when we're talking about this idea of evangelism. And this call for us to go and share and talk to our neighbors and our friends and coworkers and family about the love of Jesus. So we're going to talk through that today. But before we jump into the why, I do want to kind of begin with why we don't share our faith. Now, I want to start by asking you a few questions, and I really don't want you to raise your hand. I just want you to think in your own mind. How many of you have shared the gospel with someone this week? Okay, think about that. This month. How many of you had a chance to sit down and talk through the gospel with someone this year? You see, I think as we ask ourselves these questions, we realize, okay, I do want to do this, but I find that as I look back on my last week, or my last month, or last year, maybe I haven't been doing this as much as I want to be, as I need to be. So I want to talk right now a little bit about why we don't share. I think one of the big reasons is just fear. Anybody relate to that? It's a little bit intimidating at times to walk up to someone, even a friend, and be talking about spiritual things. I mean, you've always heard it say in society, there's two things you don't talk about in public, right? Politics and religion. And yet, Jesus says, I really want you to talk about me to people. Right? So we have this fear of what are people going to say? What if I'm rejected or made fun of? What if they don't want to spend time with me anymore as a friend or a coworker? You know, most of the time, those fears are actually misplaced. I've had the opportunity of sharing the gospel many times on campus. And I can't tell you how many times I'm about to walk into a situation where we're doing a thing called Solarium. We're trying to start gospel conversations, and I'm just nervous. I have this fear within me that someone's going to be angry because we're talking about religion. But as I sit down and start the process, it's like, and God begins to open the conversation, and 99% of the time, people are very open to talk about spiritual things, especially if we approach it in a way where we're asking questions, we're really listening and engaging with people because we actually want to listen to what they have to say. So sometimes we come in a situation where we really are afraid of what's going to happen, and to be honest, most of the time people are pretty open to talk about this. In fact, I had a good friend, I've been in a build a relationship with a guy I played racquetball with, he was an atheist. And as I began to talk to him about spiritual things, he kind of said to me at one point, I have some other Christian friends. I always thought that they were just afraid to talk about it with us because they were in the minority. And the truth is, I think sometimes we are. I'm afraid to talk about it. He's not afraid to talk about it. He wants to talk about it. And all the times I've had the opportunity to share my faith, I've only really had one person be mad at me. One. So it does happen. I mean, it's legitimate. There are some people out there who's going to be angry. because you're talking about religion, because you're talking about Jesus specifically. But for the most part, people have been pretty open. So I think that fear is mostly misplaced, but it's still real. Again, it can still happen. It doesn't take away the fact that it's there. So how do we deal with that fear? How do we find courage? I want us to look at 2 Timothy 1:7. 2 Timothy 1:7 says this, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." God, in His infinite wisdom and His grace for us, gave us a spirit of power, of love, and self-control. And the scriptures say, and not of fear. See, that fear comes from the enemy. The enemy doesn't want you to talk to your friends. Doesn't want you to share with your family. He doesn't want to talk to your neighbors because he doesn't want them to know the hope and the salvation of knowing Jesus. So he often whispers this fear to us, but the scriptures tell us that God has given us a spirit of power and of love and self-control. So what do we do when we do feel that anxiousness or that fear? Well, Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Don't be anxious about anything, but in all things with prayer and petition, present your requests to God with thanksgiving, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, guards your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." Look, I know that fear is real. And then when you're walking into a situation where you're thinking, I really want to talk to this friend about Jesus. I know that they need Jesus. And these fears start to creep up. My encouragement to you is to pray. To don't stay in that anxious state, but to go to God and let God's peace fill you. Let God's power fill you. And take heart that God is a God that gives us courage. God is a God that gives us strength in those situations. And so my encouragement to you is to walk in that courage. To ask God for courage. And believe that He is there with you. Look, I get it. It's hard sometimes to start those conversations. And we do have this internal fear, but God has called us to it, and He gives us the courage to carry it out. I think the second reason that sometimes we don't share our faith, it's a hindrance to us sharing, is that we're just too busy. We haven't really created margin in our life to have time to spend time with our neighbors, to build relationships with folks around us who don't yet know Jesus. We're in an overly busy culture. Look, I'm talking to myself. I mean, I have 4 kids, so that alone is busy, right? But then when you add band and soccer and basketball practice and dance lessons and piano lessons, I mean, and that's just my kids, my own life. I mean, I have things that I like to do and want to do, right? Not to mention the Bible studies and things I'm doing with the church. And so I have a very busy life. And sometimes God says to me, look, you need to create margin, Ryan. I need to create space in my schedule so that I have time that if my neighbor comes over and says, hey, I want to talk to you, I have time to do that. And so I think it behooves us to look at our schedule and begin to say, okay, God, let me pray over this. God, what do you want me to be a part of? How can I create space so I have time to build relationships with these people that I care about, that live right around me, that I go to work with, that live next door? How do I build in time? Let me ask you a question. What happens if your father had asked you to do a chore and you said to him, well, I don't have time for that? Or your boss asked you to carry out a task and you said, well, I'm too busy. Listen, as a believer, you have been given a mission. You have been called to love the people around you and help them discover the God of the universe. And for us to go to our general and say, man, I really like you, but my kids have soccer, and I'm taking Taekwondo, and I've got a lot of stuff going on at work right now. It doesn't really make sense. We can't allow this idea of busyness to be an excuse. Now, I do have some good news in that. Look, it's okay to have your kids go to soccer and to go to Taekwondo class. In fact, sometimes those are great places for you to build relationships with people who don't yet know Jesus. Your kids are in soccer, we'll get to know the other parents as you're sitting in practice or in games. You get to ask them questions about life and their families. And pray that God gives you opportunities to talk more deeply about Him. You're taking a Taekwondo class or whatever it is, spend time with people around you so you can talk to them about deeper things and have a conversation. God wants to use those opportunities that you already are part of to be intentional, to see people drawn to Jesus. Friends, I hope that you'll commit today to looking at your schedule and praying over it and asking God, where do I need to create margin? How can I create space? And how can I be intentional in the things that I am already doing so that you can use me for your glory? So first of all, we can be afraid. Secondly, we're busy. And third, sometimes we're just complacent. We say, I'm happy. I'm where I'm at. I don't really want to spend energy or time on that. And I hope that you would never really say that out loud. You might not say that. Sometimes our lives reflect that. Never actually say to God, I'm happy where I'm at. I don't really need to do that. But that's kind of how we live. We don't even put this idea into practice that we need to live missionally, constantly discovering ways that we can share the hope of Christ with others. You know, lazy is kind of the new cool in our culture. When we have time, we just want to spend time entertaining ourselves and not really connecting with others. Look, I'm personally guilty of this. I have a neighbor that I've been trying to get to know that's across the street from me, and I know that he needs Jesus. And there are times that I feel like, man, I should go over and talk to that guy, but man, I'm tired. I just want to veg out. And I'm guilty of that. I don't think that's what God wants of me. I don't think complacency is somewhere where we should find ourselves living. So I think these three areas are things that kind of hold us back from sharing the gospel. But why should we share our faith? What are the reasons that God has given us in His Word to help us understand the why? Let's look at Matthew chapter 28. Verses 18 through 20. It's the time when Jesus, after His crucifixion and resurrection, had pulled His disciples together before He was to pass the baton and enter into His glory. He says to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the very end of the age. Why do we need to share our faith? Because Jesus told us to. I mean, honestly, it's like, okay, I'm done. Do we need anything else? As followers of Jesus, it's a matter of obedience. He has called us to go and make disciples of all nations. Not if we feel like it or not if it's comfortable, but because He's called us to it. And listen, friends, this is a beautiful purpose that God has given us. He is sending us out as His messengers, ambassadors of Jesus, carrying the hope of the world to those around us. We have this incredible and amazing purpose that God Himself has given us, those who believe. And he calls us to go, to share with others, to make disciples of all nations. Now this word, go in the Greek, actually has two meanings. One of them is go, like go out. And you definitely see the disciples in the book of Acts, beginning from Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. They went and took the gospel with them. But there's another meaning that's significant for us. It also means as you are going. As you are going about your everyday life. This isn't just a destination kind of thing that we do. As you're going to soccer practice. As you are volunteering at that school or the hospital. As you are going to work and you sit next to the same person every day. As you are going, God has called us to make disciples of all nations. Why do we share our faith? Because God has called us to. Because it's a matter of obedience. It's a matter of fulfilling our purpose. And the truth is, when we're not fulfilling our purpose, we will never experience the depth of joy that God has called us to. You just won't. I remember the first time I was in college when I had to share the gospel with a friend, and you said yes to Jesus. I cannot explain to you the elation that you feel when you know that God has used you to help change the life and the whole world of another person. That now they know the God of creation who loves them, who has given them hope and salvation and forgiveness. And it's God who's done all of that. Not me, but he has chosen to use me in that process. And it brings so much joy. Friends, I think a lot of us are missing out on some of that joy. So we're fulfilling this purpose that God has given us to go and share with those around us. So if we're asking the question why, the first reason is simply obedience. God has called us to it. Jesus has called us to go and make disciples of all nations. Secondly, I think we evangelize and share our faith because we love God. We love him. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Verses 14 and 15. It says, for the love of Christ controls us. Now, I love what the NIV says. It says compels us. For the love of Christ compels us because we have concluded this, that one has died for all. Therefore all have died. And he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. The love of Christ compels us. When we understand how much God loves us, we want to love him back, right? Amen. And one of the ways that we love God is that we tell others about him. You know, when you love something, you naturally talk about it, don't you? You get something new, whether it's a new phone or a new car or a new gadget, you can't wait to talk about it. When you get engaged, you can't wait to talk to them about it. Because you're so in love with this person. We talk about God because we love him. We love him. And that love for him compels us to share with others. I love my wife. I've been married now for, it'll be 24 years in May. And it's been 19 and a half years of my life. If you ask her, she'd say it's been 16 and a half years of hers. When I was a bachelor, if you looked at the walls of my house, my living room, it was either nothing or like a poster of Nolan Ryan, right? Because I'm a guy. When I got married, suddenly there were flowers on my wall. And florally picture things. Things that I would never put on my wall as a bachelor, right? But when we got married, and she started decorating, I thought it was awesome because she made our house a home. And I was happy because I love her. Right? When we love someone, we're compelled to do things that maybe we don't normally do, to want things we don't normally want. When we love God, we're compelled to talk about him. And God changed my life. I used to walk in guilt and shame, and now I feel forgiveness and hope. I used to struggle with stress and anxiety, and now I have peace. And I have this God that I love and I trust. When we love God, it compels us to talk about him. And third, I think we talk to others about Jesus because we simply love people. We just love our neighbors. We really care about our friends, our family. And we want them to know the same hope and joy that we know. Look, if there's somebody in your life that you really don't care about, you're not going to go out of your way to do something. Well, I mean, as believers, maybe we should do that. Let me back up a little bit. But when we love someone, we really want them to have what's best, right? Friends, do you love your neighbors? Do you love your coworkers? More than them having a better job, a better marriage, a better income, more than anything else in the world, what our friends need is Jesus. And if we love them, we want them to know this Jesus. Which leads me to the fourth thing, in that we understand that people really do need Jesus. That above anything else. Jesus said in John 4, when he's talking to the woman at the well, he says to her, if you would ask me, I would give you living water, and you'll never thirst again. Later in John chapter 6, he says to himself, I'm the bread of life. If you come to me, you'll never hunger. He's not talking about food and water. He's talking about soul satisfaction. In the depth of who you are. That you are completely and wholly satisfied because you have Jesus. And nothing else can do that. You can chase after money and relationships and fame and pleasure, and it does not matter. Those things promise big and deliver low. Because you can get those things and still be dissatisfied. King Solomon was probably the richest person that ever lived. He had everything that a person ever wanted. Money, fame, buildings, women. I mean, he had all those things. And you said what he said about all those things? Meaningless. Meaningless, meaningless. All meaningless. Look, our friends are chasing after these things that are meaningless. Hoping to find satisfaction. And what they really need is something that you have. What they really need is Jesus. Amen. You don't have to look very far in pop culture, TV or movies, songs. You hear people say these things. They're looking for something and they're not finding it. In the great words of the philosopher Mick Jagger, he said, I can't get no satisfaction. Mick Jagger. Rich, famous, still, I can't get no satisfaction. Why? He doesn't have Jesus yet. And Jesus is the one that says, if you will drink from me, you'll never be thirsty again. If you eat from me, you'll never be hungry. Friends, the people that we love, that are right around us here, our neighbors and our coworkers, our friends, they need Jesus more than anything else in the world.
Amen.
Why do we share our faith? Why do we evangelize? Why is this so important that we spend a whole 3 sermons talking about it? Because Jesus has called us to it. It is our mission. Because it shows that we actually love God. We're not just talking about it, we're living it out. We love people. And we know that they need Jesus. They need him. That's why we share faith. Now look, I know that even sometimes knowing that God has called us to it and that we want to do it, there's still some other hindrances to keep us from that. And one of those is that, man, I don't know enough. I don't have all the answers. I'm afraid if I start talking to someone about, they're going to ask me questions I don't know. Let me just real quickly give you the answer. If someone asks you a question and you don't know, this is what you say. I don't know. And that is okay. In fact, most people respect you more for not acting like you know everything or have it all together. You say, I don't really know the answer to that. Let me get back to you. You don't have to have all the answers to talk to people about your faith. You can just share what God's done in your life. This is what he's done for me. This is what he's done for all of us. He's died on the cross for us so we can be forgiven of our sins. And he rose again to show his power over death, and you too can be forgiven if you choose to follow Jesus. You don't have to know everything. Secondly, sometimes we are afraid to share because we're afraid we're going to do it wrong. I understand that. At the same time, I think that we think too highly of ourselves. It's not us that leads people to Jesus. It's God. It's the Holy Spirit. Now, we are his tool. We're the messengers, right? We are called to share the good news and what God's done in our life. And if we stumble over our words, that's okay. Because it's God who does the work in the hearts of people's lives. That's often, to me, that relieves a lot of pressure. Because I'm called to love people and to share with them, but I cannot bring salvation. That I can't make someone choose, and I don't have to. That's not my job. My job is to love them and to talk to them about Jesus, to try to answer their questions the best I can. And let God do the rest. You don't have to know everything. Don't feel like you can do everything right. It's okay. What God is asking you to do and me to do is to try. And so, my friends, I want to ask you to decide today. Decide, first of all, that you want to obey and be a part of the mission of God. It's for your joy and the benefit of the kingdom. So choose today to be a part of that mission. And secondly, I want to encourage you to decide, I want to learn how to do this. If I'm unsure, I want to talk to Pastor Matt or Pastor Toby or some other friends I know are sharing their faith. I want to kind of figure this out. What do you do? And if you can't find anyone, just tell your own story. This is why I chose to follow Jesus. This is why I follow him today. Ryan, I followed Jesus when I was 8. That's okay. Started following Jesus when I was 8. This is why I follow him today. This is what he's doing in my life now. And why he's so important to me. You can share your story. Number 3, I want to encourage you today to start praying and trusting Jesus in the process. Pray for your friends around you who don't know the Lord. In fact, if you have your program with you, I want you to pull it out. If you take a pen, I want you to write down 3 to 5 people in your life who you know don't know Jesus. They can be your neighbors, be family members, friends from the gym, doesn't matter. I want you to commit to praying for those people every day this week. Pray for them. Pray and trust God in the process. Pray that God will give you an opportunity to talk to them. And then fourth, I want you to commit to looking for opportunities to talk about Jesus. Because when you start praying for opportunities, God starts opening those doors. We have to look for them. And we have to step through them. Right? Pray for our friends and pray for opportunities. And then lastly, I want you to commit, and if you will, today, to asking spiritual questions to your friends or family to start these conversations. It could be as simple as asking someone you know, do you have any spiritual beliefs? Now, you may know someone who does not go to church and has told you they don't want to go to church. I'm not religious. Okay. Well, do you have any spiritual beliefs? Have you ever gone to church? Tell me about that. If you start asking those questions, people are often very open to sharing about what their thoughts are on those things. And ask follow-up questions. Well, what happens? So you went to church when you were a kid. What happened? Why did you stop? And then listen. And pray. And sometimes people have misguided understanding of God and church because of a situation that happened in their past. And sometimes God will allow you the opportunity to say, I'm really sorry that happened. I really don't think that's what Jesus wanted them to say or to do with you in that moment. I really believe Jesus still loves you. I think he wants you to give him another chance. If you can commit to this week to ask someone a spiritual question, I think you'll begin to see some of these doors open and opportunities for you to talk to people about Jesus. Ask people, what do you think about Jesus? Have you ever read anything about Jesus? I'm often surprised when I talk to folks who have these opinions but have never actually read the Bible, what Jesus did or said. So that often can start a conversation. Well, would you like to read and kind of get firsthand, see what he said and did? Imagine if everyone in this room this week had a spiritual conversation, and if half of you had just, well, let me give you a Bible. And the other half of those half got to say, let me tell you more about why Jesus came and died, and actually got to maybe share the gospel, someone draw a picture of why Jesus died on the cross. What if God began through each of you to reach this community one person at a time? I don't think that's far-fetched. I think sometimes we miss out on kingdom growth because we're just not thinking missionally. God has placed me here to be on mission with him, and how can I love the people around me in a way? How can I talk to people so that I can start these conversations and actually begin to share the hope of Christ? Friends, I really believe that if we began doing that together, you would see some pretty amazing things. Now, sometimes that's a slow process. Like, I work with college students who sometimes it's a year process of them first talking about spiritual things and sharing the gospel, to them thinking and maybe becoming curious, starting to wonder, okay, maybe I could change, and starting to really seek. And so there's a process there that happens. For others, that process may go a lot faster, but still, each of those steps, somebody celebrated. God is working in people's lives. And I believe he wants to use you in that process. Why do we evangelize? Let We evangelize because we're called to it. It's a matter of obedience. We do it because we love God, and that love compels us. We're talking about Jesus because we love people. We know above everything else, there's nothing else in this life that brings satisfaction other than Jesus. Let me pray for us. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you, God, that you continue to encourage us and challenge us, Lord, to be on this mission with you, that you're an incredible and a powerful God. God, I pray that you'll infuse us with courage in times when we approach those conversations and are timid or anxious or fearful. Help us in those moments to really pray and to rest in you, to find your courage in those moments. God, I pray that as we begin to pray for our friends around us, we begin to talk to people and ask these questions and begin to engage with our friends in conversation, Lord, that you will just open doors. And we'll see you move in hearts and draw people to you. Jesus, thank you for the joy that comes when we get to see our friends choose you for the first time. Jesus, thank you so much. I ask that your Spirit would move in us. God, that you would send us out into this mission field and allow us to see you work. Jesus, we love you so much. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Ryan. Brought so many things. You know, I could hear a sermon on evangelism every Sunday, and I'm telling you, I don't think it would be enough. I need to be reminded all the time. Think about this. Jesus, 2,000 years, you. How did that happen? Because somebody shared the gospel. And then somebody shared the gospel. And somebody shared the gospel. There's 2,000 years of connections between Jesus and you. And the question is, are you going to keep it going? We have to. And I can't explain how this works, but I'm telling you, the times in my life when I've done the most evangelism has affected everything else in my life. I can't draw on a piece of paper and really describe how doing evangelism makes my marriage better, but I'm telling you, it does. Because I think that's just a thing that if we are obedient to God, it has an impact on everything else in our life. And it's the same thing with financial stewardship. You know, when you give more, when you're more generous, it just affects everything else. Because you're being obedient to God, and He's using those things. And, you know, we have to go out. Just go knock on somebody's door. You know, it's weird if I go to Wayne's neighborhood and start knocking on his neighbor's doors. They're going to answer the door, and then they're going to wonder who I am, and it's going to be a weird conversation. It's not weird when I go to my neighbors and knock on their doors. Because then when they ask why I'm there and who I am, I can tell them, I'm your neighbor, and I want to get to know you. And that's not weird, okay? Me and Leslie, we've done it. We've been here for a year. We've knocked on a lot of our neighbors' doors. We've had great conversations. Do you catch people at a bad time sometimes? Yeah, it happens. But you know what? They'll get over it. And even if you don't get to have a conversation, they're probably going to think, man, I was really rude to that person earlier. And that was just a friendly neighbor. Go knock on somebody's door. It's not weird. Not when it's your neighbor. Remember, we talked about the parable of the sower a couple times last month, didn't we? You know, and the main point of that parable was about the soils. But go back and look at the sower. He wasn't like, ooh, I'm going to take a seed out of my bag, and I've got this seed, and I'm just going to wait for the exact right time, and I'm going to put it in the exact right spot. Ooh, I think that looks like a good spot. Okay, I think this is the right time. I'm just going to do it. No, he was reaching in his bag, and he was throwing seed everywhere. It didn't make any sense. There was seed falling everywhere, but you know what? That's what we're supposed to do with the gospel. Just throw it everywhere. Throw it into all of our conversations every time we can. Plant those seeds. Be liberal with the gospel, okay? We don't have to be conservative with God's good news about Jesus. Just go get out there and do it.